Tonight, our presentation is on legacy giving during a pandemic, the why, the how, and the what. And so I'm going to start us off tonight by talking about the why. Why talk about legacy gifts during a pandemic? But first, we really need to have an understanding of what we're talking about when we talk about legacy gifts. Sometimes you'll hear the expression planned gifts. We use those terms interchangeably. And what we're talking about is it's usually a gift from accumulated resources. People receive income, either their wages and salary or their retirement income, but they have money that comes in every month, and that money goes out, a lot of it. It goes for our tithes and offerings, our regular monthly expenses. And when we're talking about legacy giving or planned giving, we're not talking about that pocket. We're talking about typically accumulated resources. Often the gifts that are used as legacy gifts are illiquid. That means they're not cash. It's not something that's going to show up in the offering plate. I doubt if you've ever had a deed to a piece of real estate or a certificate of stock placed in the offering plate. So we're talking about things that have to be converted to cash. It usually requires the assistance of some other professional. It could be a financial planner, a planned giving officer like Kim or myself, an accountant, or an attorney, but usually requires someone else to help realize that gift. And usually when people are making a planned gift or a legacy gift, they're not looking to replace their annual giving, but to supplement it. And it's often part of the donor's comprehensive financial plan or estate plan to include some type of a legacy gift. At the foundation, what we really try to do when we're working with individuals who want to make gifts is to match their needs with the needs that exist in the ministry or the church that they want to support, taking into account their particular circumstances. So let's talk about the various types of, or let's talk about why during a pandemic you would focus on planned giving. And I have a couple of reasons for this. Number one, I think we should always include planned giving, legacy giving, in our discussion around stewardship. The reason for that is that people will hear a planned giving message when they need to. And you, church leaders and pastors, will not always know when they need to hear it. There are certain triggering events that might cause them to perk up and listen to a planned giving message. And I've got some of them on the bullet points here. There might be an economic windfall, maybe an inheritance, maybe a new marriage, or maybe a divorce, a death, birth of children or grandchildren, an illness that gets them focused on the end of life, when they become empty nesters, when they retire, or when they just decide we've put this off long enough and it's time to get our affairs in order. These are all times when people will be listening and will hear a planned giving message. So be consistent in offering information about planned giving. But even maybe especially during a pandemic, it's a good idea to communicate about planned giving. People are acutely aware of a great need in the world. Some people have been affected directly by the pandemic, and there's loss of loved ones, there's loss of jobs, so loss of income, and so there's just, we know that there are some people who have a great need. And so some in your congregations may be thinking of ways that they can help address those needs. Also, during a pandemic, we become aware of our mortality. And when we start thinking about our mortality, then we realize we haven't got everything in order that needs to be gotten in order. So it's time to quit putting it off and make an appointment with the attorney and get our wills done and get our affairs in order. I've talked to some people who have not personally experienced any economic downturn during the pandemic, and some have even had sort of a windfall. They've seen their investment accounts and their 401ks and retirement plans increasing in value, and yet they got a stimulus check. And so those are people who may feel like, I really need to do something more because so many people have been negatively affected and I seem to be benefiting. And finally, it's really a pastoral care issue. I can almost guarantee you that there's at least one person in each of your congregations who is losing sleep at night, wondering what's going to happen to their stuff when they're gone, because they have accumulated more than maybe they ever dreamed that they would accumulate, and they have been slow to get their affairs in order, and so it becomes something that they worry about. And Kim and I have come across many of these people in our travels around the West Virginia Annual Conference back when we used to travel before March. And it's a real pastoral need that people are just waiting to hear a message about planned giving. So with that why answered, I'm going to turn to Kim now to talk about part of the how. Kim, you're muted.
Muted. I just lost my notes. Hang on. Okay. Jeff explained why now is a time that's full of opportunities for church leaders not only to encourage legacy gifts, but to be equipped with the tools and resources for their congregation so that they can help the donors who are thinking about it. The next logical question, once we understand the why, is how? How do we encourage generous legacy giving during a pandemic? I want to look at how as a four-part process: preparation, proclamation, education, and continual encouragement. First, remember that you are not alone. Work with other leaders in your church. My suggestion is to start with the Board of Trustees. The mission of the trustees is to care for the church property, and that includes bequests and planned gifts. Meet with the trustees, talk to them about why now is the time to start. Get the Board of Trustees on board. In fact, after tonight, when we send you the link to the video, you'll have a perfect training tool you can use with them. I encourage boards of trustees to develop a gift acceptance policy. A gift acceptance policy communicates to potential donors the types of gifts that can be accepted by the church and the manner in which they can be accepted. I'm going to give you a silly example, but for example, Mark calls and tells the pastor that he would like to leave the church. He would like to leave the church his collection of stuffed iguanas. And he would like the church to maintain those in perpetuity. They would have this collection forever. So the pastor can express gratitude to the gift, but she can point to the gift acceptance policy and say, I'm so sorry, Mark, our policy does not allow us to accept iguanas. So it's not a personal affront to Mark, it's a matter of policy. So it's a good reason and good protection to have a gift acceptance policy. A gift acceptance policy is also the place where the church leadership can outline the percentage of bequest gifts that will go to the endowment. You do this before you have any gifts. That way there's no temptation to spend it all when it's received. You have a policy. This is how we deal with bequests. Part of it becomes endowment. And the gift acceptance policy provides donors with the guidance regarding the nature of the gifts they can give and how the gifts will be used by the church, which is important to them. And it promotes the idea that the church will be a good steward of what they give because the church has been intentional in planning for their gift ahead of time. Thirdly, consider starting an account at the foundation to receive planned gifts. Once you've done that, and we'll work with you to help, once you've done it, market it, talk about it, make it public knowledge that you have this account. It continues to communicate to the congregation that the church is a good steward of legacy gifts, and that as a church, you expect to exist far into the future, that you have the hope of the future, that you'll be doing God's work, and that their funds can help to fund that ministry. So next, think of proclamation. In general, I think as people, we don't like to talk about money, and we don't like to talk about death. But as a church, as the church, we are uniquely positioned to bring good news about both of those, and we should. Leading your congregation and whole life stewardship is part of discipleship. Preach about stewardship, not just a couple Sundays in November, but all year long. And include legacy giving in that proclamation. Has someone left a legacy gift to your church? Tell that story. Use it as a sermon illustration. How has it changed or enabled ministry? You can also consider using lectionary-based offertory prayers. We'll provide you with a link to those. Those are already prepared for you, and you can download them. They match the Revised Common Lectionary readings. So talk about stewardship all year long, including legacy giving. Once your board of trustees is on board, invite members to include short segments in worship about how previous planned gifts have enabled ministry. Have other people tell the story. A lot of this is really about telling the story, helping people understand how their gift can help ministry. I also want to encourage you to consecrate gifts in worship, those planned gifts. That helps people understand that the legacy giving is a sacred act, and it provides encouragement for others to do the same. Has a legacy gift made a scholarship possible? Award the scholarship during worship. Pray for that student and give thanks for the donor who made the scholarship possible. We have a liturgy you can use to dedicate a gift. That'll be provided to you as well. Are you streaming worship? Are you joining in pre-recorded worship? You can do this even through this pandemic in those kinds of worship. Still include this type of worship in what you're doing. Our third part is education. I want to encourage you to hold an estate planning event. Jeff's already talked about how people need this kind of ministry during this time, and you can help them doing this. The foundation will help you as well. So have that estate planning event, hold it remotely if you need to, record it for those who can't attend live, and make it available to them later. Include not only planned giving, but all other estate planning documents, such as living wills and medical powers of attorney. Your congregation needs to hear about them, wants to hear about them, is really worried about them. So talk about it. Lead people to the peace that comes from having these documents in place. Don't forget to mention charitable gifts through bequests when you do it. Think about ways to offer education all throughout the year. We'll provide you with links to newsletter articles you can use in your newsletters about planned giving, whether those newsletters are paper or electronic. We will help you with brochure development if you need it for your endowment program. And I want to encourage you to celebrate Foundation Sunday each year. Next year it will be in May in 2021, but really any day is a good day to celebrate the foundation. So celebrate a Foundation Sunday whenever you'd like. Think about ways to encourage year-end giving. There are special tax benefits, and there's some special ones this year. So think about year-end giving and how to encourage your donors to give at the end of the year. The foundation produces a year-end giving brochure, and you can order free copies of it. Maybe you mail it to your donors since they may not be meeting with you in person. Just when you do it, remind them to review their wills if they already have a will, or to prepare a will if they don't. And lastly, I want to remind you to offer continuous encouragement. Jeff already mentioned why it's important to do planned giving all the time, to talk about it all the time. So include small reminders in everything you publish, however you publish it. The foundation offers something we call one-liners. These are little sentences that you could put in your bulletin, your newsletter, your statements, anything you send out, however you send it out. It might say, have you considered adding a gift to the church in your will? A short little sentence, and there's about 5 pages of them, so you can move them around and use different ones at different times. But remember, they only see it when they need it. So you need to do it all the time. Leading people to generous giving and stewardship is a year-round ministry. Consider appointing a task force to care for it. It might be a group of your board of trustees, or if your board of trustees is really excited about it, it could be the whole board. But have a group dedicated to intentionally think about it. Begin by viewing this seminar that we're recording tonight together and talk about it. Brainstorm about ways that you as a group can make this happen in your church. And then develop an intentional plan for the year. And as always, I encourage you to not forget gratitude. Personal notes of gratitude and donor recognition, if your donor gives you permission, are not only ways to encourage gifts, but they're the basis of encouraging generosity as part of discipleship. Most often, we are generous because we are grateful. We are grateful to God, we are grateful for each other, and we're grateful for the ministry God is doing among us and in the community. So please be intentional about thanking people. They will remember it. When you write them a little note, they'll remember it. Remember that one of the reasons to be equipped to help people with legacy giving is that it's a form of pastoral care. All of this that we're talking about begins with relationship building. Listen when you visit people, whether you're visiting them on their front porch or you're giving them a phone call, just pay attention to what they're saying. Develop that relationship. If you've prepared and proclaimed and educated, and if you're continually encouraging them, one of them might say to you, I've really been thinking about what you're talking about, and I think it's time I wrote my will, and I want to leave a gift to the church. Or you may find that now is the time for you to bring it up, that the opening is there and that you can ask for the gift. And whichever it is, the foundation is here to help. Whether you need us to visit a donor with you or to talk to a donor who needs extra help, we're here to do that. And you're encouraged to contact us because we'll help. Now that we've talked about how and we've talked about why, Jeff's going to talk further about what. What are the tools of legacy giving?
Thank you, Kim. So there are several tools of legacy giving, and maybe the most common one that we always think about in terms of getting our estate settled is a bequest, a gift from a will or a living trust. But there are many other tools that can be used to leave a legacy. And so we're going to talk also about beneficiary designations, payable on death or transfer on death. We're going to talk about gifts of appreciated securities. We're going to talk about the qualified charitable distribution from the IRA. And we're going to talk about some gifts with lifetime income. Remember that, as I said at the outset, we see our mission as matching the donor's needs under their circumstances with the needs that exist in the ministry that they want to support. So there are different tools depending on the donor's circumstances. But the first thing I want to mention is, as I said, the will is probably foremost on most people's minds in terms of an estate plan or a gift, legacy type gift. Consider that the will, we call it a last will and testament. And I don't know whether you know that a will is a public document. When a person dies who has a will, their will is taken to the courthouse, the local courthouse in the county in which they resided, and it's entered into the public record. So your will could be the last opportunity for you to give a Christian witness. And I encourage people to use a Christian preamble. If you've ever seen a will read on a movie, or if you've ever gone to the courthouse and looked at a will, you'll see that they all start pretty much the same way. I, Jeff Taylor, being of sound mind and disposing memory, do hereby, and it goes on. You've heard those words before. Consider replacing that legalese with a Christian testimony. And we've got one on the screen, and there's one in the resources in the chat that'll be sent to you. Because in perpetuity, when people are in the courthouse and they read your will for whatever reason, they will see your Christian testimony and then consider not only having the Christian preamble, but to put that in action in the dispository conditions of your will by making a planned gift from your will. So that's something for you to consider and for you to share with members of your congregations. But as I mentioned, the bequest is probably where the largest gifts come from. This is a gift that is set out in a last will and testament or a living trust. Those are two different ways of accomplishing the same things. They dispose of an individual's estate. And it's usually the easiest way to make the biggest gift. It's revocable. People can change their will as their circumstances changed. So they're not, when they make their will, they haven't made a gift yet. And if their circumstances change, they can change their will either by doing a codicil, which is an amendment, or just making a new will. So it's revocable. It can be for a specific amount, or it can be a percentage of the net estate. It can be a specific property, real estate or personal property. And it can be contingent on something else happening. A common contingency is to have, in the event that my spouse should predecease me, then I give my estate or a certain portion of my estate to my church. Or it can be residual. And what that means is, after setting out specific bequests to all of your loved ones and those that need to be taken care of under the will, the donor can say the rest, residue, and remainder I leave to my church after everything else is taken care of. And many times that rest, residue, and remainder ends up being the largest single gift from the estate. So in that one document, people who make a will or a living trust can take care of all of the objects of their affection, all of their loved ones and family and church and charities, all in the same document. But we have to keep in mind when we're getting our will prepared that not all assets are going to be disposed of according to the terms of the will. For instance, there are certain kinds of property that are often held jointly. If you're married and own real estate, you probably have a joint tenancy with survivorship. So the property will pass directly to the surviving spouse without going through the will. This can also apply to bank accounts, to automobiles. So as you're making sure that your will is the way you want to consider the fact that not all property will be disposed of according to the will. In addition to joint property, there are certain property and certain accounts that have beneficiary designations. So life insurance usually does not go through the estate under the terms of the will. There can be a beneficiary. There can be a secondary beneficiary. If the first one dies, there can be a third beneficiary. I often suggest that everyone in your congregation could make the church the last beneficiary In the event that the spouse dies and the children die, then the church could be the last beneficiary, and that life insurance proceeds would pass directly to the church without going through probate. Retirement accounts also have beneficiary designations, and the same principle applies there. Retirement accounts, though, are especially useful for charitable gifts, because if those retirement accounts that have had favorable tax treatment during the years that they were being built up, when individuals get those retirement accounts, they have to pay taxes on the distributions. So it is a way, if you have $100,000 and $50,000 is in a retirement account, consider giving the church the retirement account and the kids the other account, which they wouldn't have to pay taxes on. Next, there's something called the Totten Trust. I don't know if anyone still calls it a Totten Trust, but I do. This is simply a payable on death or transfer on death account. So bank accounts can be set up so that they are payable on death directly to one or more beneficiary. And I see that I have a typo on the slide, but the beneficiary can be an individual, or it can be a charitable beneficiary, such as the church. And then investment accounts can be set up as transfer on death. And it's really the same thing, it's just different language, because the investment account would just be transferred to the name of the beneficiary. And then a new thing in West Virginia, and this doesn't apply to our listeners from Maryland, but the owner of real estate in West Virginia can make a transfer on death deed. And the transfer can be to a charitable organization, so that upon the death of the owner, it would transfer outside of the estate directly to the charity in this case. So this is all a way of illustrating that when a person is getting her or his affairs in order, they need to not only have a will, but they need to look at the beneficiary designations, at the type of account, whether it's joint or not, and consider transfer on death and payable on death. I like to mention here the option that we offer at the foundation for gifting securities. And I just mean stocks and bonds. As I said earlier, I doubt if many of your congregations have received a share of stock in your offering plate. But our foundation has a discount brokerage account where an individual, and I got a call from someone today who's transferring some Apple stock. He just wants to transfer it to our discount brokerage account. I will watch for it. It'll probably show up in our account tomorrow. I'll sell it. The net proceeds will go into our checking account, and we will write a check to his church. And there's no fee. The foundation doesn't charge any fee for that service. But when someone is considering giving securities, they want to consider whether the securities have appreciated while they've owned it or depreciated while they've owned it. And in most cases, they've probably appreciated in value. That just means the value has gone up. In that case, they would want to transfer the securities directly to the charity, perhaps using our discount brokerage account. By doing so, they are eligible for a tax deduction if they itemize on the total market value, and they avoid any capital gains on the increased value during the time that they held it. Conversely, if the value has gone down during the time that they've owned it, they may want to consider selling the securities, taking the loss, giving the net proceeds, and then they may be able to reduce their tax liability not only by claiming a charitable deduction for the value of the cash gift, but also a capital loss. We have these gift instructions that are available upon request. That the fellow I was telling you about, I emailed him our instructions so that he could go into his self-directed portfolio and transfer these shares of Apple to help his local church. I think there's a link to a way that you can request those. The next thing is the qualified charitable distribution from your IRA. This is often called the charitable IRA rollover. And this is for donors who are at least 70 and a half years old. And that is the age at which we have to start taking minimum distributions from our IRAs. And this qualified charitable distribution was created as a response to Katrina back in 2006. And it was a way that Congress found that they could encourage charitable giving from that group of individuals who were sometimes taking a distribution from their IRA only because they had to, not because they needed to. So it doesn't allow for a deduction for the distribution, but there's no income tax on the distribution. So it's a non-taxable event. And since 2006, it was just enacted 1 year at a time, every year since 2006 until 2017, I think, when it was made permanent, whatever permanent means in Congress. But we know we can claim it this year. This is a similar year as 2006 with the response to Katrina, where I know many people are considering charitable IRA rollovers to help meet the great need. Now, it's important that if you're considering, or if someone in your congregation is considering this type of a qualified charitable distribution, they cannot ask for the distribution and then give it to the charity. It has to be done directly from the IRA administrator to the charity, to a qualified charity. The foundation or your church are qualified charities to receive those type of gifts. There are many in our churches who are in the age group where they may want to consider a qualified charitable distribution from their IRA. Now I want to turn to gifts that have a component of lifetime income. And the first of these is a charitable gift annuity. And this is the simplest type of lifetime income gift. This provides a guaranteed stream of income for 1 or 2 lifetimes. So it could be an individual or it could be a couple who would create a charitable gift annuity. They would give a certain amount to the foundation. In exchange for that, we would pay them an annuity that is based on their age at the time of the gift. They would receive, or they could receive, a deduction for a charitable contribution in the year of the gift. I say they could receive because fewer people are itemizing now. But then the other tax advantage is that part of that income stream from the annuity is tax-free. And the rates are based solely on age. And then at the end of the donor's life at the donor's death or the second to die in the case of a 2 lifetime gift annuity. The remainder goes to the church or the charity or the ministry that they set out from the outset in their contract with us. So we have some samples of how these would work on a $10,000 gift at various ages. And that'll be popping right up. Yeah. So at age 60, and these are single life gift annuities. The rates are different when there's a couple, but a 60-year-old would get a 3.9% annuity for life, which is $390. 329 of that would be tax-free, and then they would be eligible for a deduction that year of $2,022. They're not eligible for 100% of what they gave because of the fact that they're getting part of that back. So this is all determined based on software that takes into account the actuary tables, and we can prepare no obligation proposals for anyone who's interested in a gift annuity for a specific amount at a specific age. And you see how the rates increase based on age, with the highest rate being for a 90-year-old who would get 8.6%. We recently had a donor who passed away at 105, and she had several of these gift annuities, and some of them were started when she was in her 90s, and the rates were higher at the time. And I think she had one where she was getting 11.3. The charitable gift annuities are a risk to the charity because that income stream that continues no matter what happens to the underlying value of what they gave. So they can go, we use the term underwater, and there might be nothing left for the charity when they die. But what we have discovered is that people sort of get addicted to gift annuities. They give one and they like that stream of income, so they get another one and another one. And we have, a couple of years ago, we had a woman who passed away and she had 16 gift annuities. So some of them were underwater, but there was a residual in enough of them that she left a nice endowment that benefited all of the churches that her husband served during his time, and he had died back in the 70s. So the churches who benefit from her philanthropy probably never expected her to be a philanthropist. And not only that, but she also added to that with a gift from her retirement account, because she was a CPA and she knew that her children could get part of her estate tax-free, but the retirement account was better used for the charitable gift. So we have a gift annuity reserve that covers those that go underwater, but we find that the fact that we're creating friends when we do these gift annuities, so they usually make other gifts at the same time. But you could consider steering some of your congregants who may have assets but need income to consider a charitable gift annuity. And then another kind of lifetime income gift is a charitable remainder trust. These are a little more complicated. There's more reporting requirements. They have to file a tax return, which we do that. But they're more flexible. They can pay a fixed amount of income, which is called an annuity trust, a CRAT, or a fixed percentage, which is called a CRUT, a unitrust. And the donor has flexibility to select a percentage. and they can be for a lifetime or a term of years, like 20 years. And with the unitrust type of charitable remainder trust, the donor can add to it if she desires. What else did I want to say about charitable remainder trusts? I lost my train of thought, but the tax advantages are that there is the potential for a charitable deduction in the year of the gift, and then the income that is received has favorable tax treatment. And I remembered what I wanted to say. Now remember that the charitable gift annuity, it pays a guaranteed annuity for life, irrespective of what happens to the underlying value of the gift. The charitable remainder trust is different. It's valued each year, and the payment for the next year is a percentage of the December 31st value. So there's not a risk to it going underwater. If the value of the underlying principal decreases, then the payout next year decreases. Likewise, if it increases, then the payment increases. So we have a lot of charitable remainder trusts and a lot of gift annuities at our foundation because, as I say, some people have assets, but they're not producing the kind of income that they need, and it provides these gift arrangements. For those who have charitable intent and a desire to make a legacy gift, it's a way they can do it and still provide themselves a meaningful income to supplement their Social Security and retirement. So it's a win-win. We went through a lot of material tonight, and we did it. It felt to me like it was pretty quickly. I hope you don't disagree too strongly, but we do have room for some questions.
There's a question. Could you explain what a donor advised fund is?
Yes, a donor advised fund is another vehicle where a donor or a family can create an account at the foundation or many different community foundations and charitable funds that allow donor advised funds. And it's a way that they can have give advice on how the distribution should be made. If you think about a family foundation, there are a lot of families who create a family foundation, and they can put money in that foundation, and then as needs arise, rather than going to their personal checkbook, they can make all of their charitable gifts from that family foundation. The family foundation has some reporting requirements with the IRS. They have to file a tax return. They have to distribute at least 5% of the value of the account each year. And sometimes that means that they have to sell something in the portfolio to come up with the 5%. So a donor advised fund is a way to get the same kind of enjoyment of giving money away without the reporting requirements and without the minimum. So we've actually had some family foundations that have liquidated and distributed their proceeds to a donor advised fund. And what the donor is giving up is the right to absolutely direct where the distributions should go. If the donor has the right to direct, then it's not a charitable gift, and so it doesn't qualify. So they can only give advice. And our policy is that as long as it doesn't go against Christian principles, United Methodist principles, we always try to follow the donor's advice. We do have a donor that has a donor advised fund, and he's made some gifts overseas. And it's very hard. You can't just go to Nepal and ask for their tax documents. It's different in every context. And so we have had to have some discussions with him about whether or not we're able to make the distributions. In one case, we actually hired counsel to investigate and determine that it was a charitable cause, and so we supported it. But the donor can only give advice. I hope that answers the question.
And Kim did add a link to the chat with more information on donor advised funds.
Great, thank you.
There are no further questions right now.
Okay, well, that concludes our presentation, and I think Kim is going to share with us some information about the upcoming sessions.
Hi again. We do have 2 more sessions coming. Our remaining 2 sessions will be welcoming Grace Duddy Pomeroy as our presenter. Grace is the Director of Stewardship Leaders Program at Luther Seminary, and as a layperson, she's a millennial. She's a stewardship leader and speaker and financial educator based in Minneapolis. I think you'll enjoy her style and find her very engaging. We were privileged to hear her speak at one of the events we attended, and we're glad to recruit her for this. On November 5th at 7:30, her topic will be generations and stewardship. I think that often people have preconceptions of younger people, and they're overlooked by congregations because people assume they aren't generous. She'll help us take a closer look at generational characteristics and giving patterns across all living American generations, and lead us through some research centered on demographics and giving trends associated with millennials and Gen Xers. She'll also share some ideas that work to engage younger congregational members in giving. On November 12th, her topic is What's Your Why? Whether it's why church or why we give, why is the most crucial question we can ask or answer for our stewardship work. Join Grace in discussing the why of stewardship and how that affects the way we give and the way others give. If you're in this session and you're already registered for those other 2 sessions, when you receive your email about the resources from tonight, these dates will be in there to remind you, and you'll receive the links as well. So we hope you join us the first 2 Thursdays in November for the other 2 sessions of our Academy.
And Kim, if I could back up, we did get 2 more questions.
Great.
The first is, if you decide to give to one of our mission projects, can you designate how they would like it spent? Is that similar to the area that Kim has shared already?
I would say that the quick answer is yes, you can designate how it's spent. The mission project may have a gift acceptance policy that might address that. That would be the only caveat. I like to get the beneficiary involved in the gift process, if at all possible. So if I were working with a donor that wanted to leave a gift for a mission project and wanted it spent a certain way, I would want to, with the donor's permission, have the conversation include the mission project director so that there's an understanding. But I would say the donor is always in the driver's seat to direct how the money would be spent. Sometimes we like to help them with the wheel, if at all possible, because there are some gifts that can be too cumbersome on the beneficiary. If it's too narrow, we have to keep in mind that, and I'll use the example of pipe organs. I would say that 50, 75 years ago, an endowment for a pipe organ would have been a lot more desired than it is in many of our congregations today. So if there's an endowment, if some church has an endowment for a pipe organ and there's no pipe organ, then what do? Well, they have to go to court and see if they can lift the restriction. But if it's written broadly enough, then like music ministries or musical instruments, then, but the same thing would apply with a mission project in terms of designating how it would be spent.
I would add to that, if you are a church and you receive a bequest that has a restriction, by accepting the bequest, you are saying we will follow the restriction. Once you accept the bequest, the restriction becomes part of how you can use that gift. So you can say no to the gift before you accept it, but once you've accepted it, the restriction is binding on what you receive, unless you have a court action that changes it.
The other question is, please explain how you work with the donor's attorney, accountant, financial planner, etc.
Oh, that's a good question. I'm glad somebody asked that. When we are working with individuals, I really like to include their family and their other trusted advisors, if it's possible. And again, the donor is in the driver's seat, and it's a confidential relationship. And if they absolutely don't want the kids to know about it, then that's the way we have to handle it. But I like it when there are no surprises. when the kids don't come to me and say, how did you get Dad to make this provision in his will? I would rather that they know up front. So we try to involve the trusted advisors and the family in these discussions around the kitchen table. So I hope that answers that question.
All right, are there any other questions?
Well, again, we do thank you for your presence with us tonight. And as we said at the outset, look for an email that will contain some links. And we hope to see you at the sessions in November. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. We have our contact information on that slide for any topic under the banner of stewardship in a broad sense. We'd be glad to help you and your congregation. Thank you all.